This presentation is on cattle shrink. There are two types of shrink. One is excretory, which is the loss of urine and feces. Much of this loss is replaced when cattle again are allowed to eat and drink. The second type of loss is tissue loss. It is the loss of fluid from the cells. This tissue shrink occurs more slowly, but actually it takes the animals longer to recover from this sort of shrink. The impacts of hauling can impact shrink. Easy handling during the loading process and minimizing quick starts and stops when hauling the cattle can reduce shrinkage. Most of the shrinkage occurs during the loading in the first 25 miles, or even if you think in terms of time, the first 30 minutes of a trip. Cattle are still getting adjusted on how to stand. They may lose as much then as they do, say, over 200 miles. However, the longer they're on the truck, you're going to get more and more shrink. Pencil shrink is something that's applied usually by cattle buyers. Let's say they bought cattle right off the farm. Well, they may put in what's called a pencil shrink for those cattle when they, to account for if, although they came from a farm, maybe they want to account for like if they had went through a market. So pencil shrink is 2 to 3% for feeder cattle, maybe 3 to 4 for finished cattle. Different classes of cattle shrink different ways. Between steers and heifers, it's variable, but heifers shrink slightly more, and finished cattle shrink a little more than feeder cattle in the first 8 to 10 hours. Feeder cattle shrink about 2% more on long hauls and up to 7 to 9% on longer hauls. An overnight stand of 12 hours without feed or water can cause about a 4% shrink in cattle that have been on lush grass or silage, whereas the same cattle that have been on a high grain diet and held for 12 hours, there may be a 2.5 to 3% shrink. Environment can impact how much shrink occurs. Stocker cattle shrink more when shipped in the summer compared to those shipped in the fall or spring. Both fecal and urine outputs can be lower when the ambient temperature is higher. However, there's increased body weight loss during the higher temperatures, and that's the result of respiratory loss. Kind of similar to that tissue loss because it's bringing fluid out of the body. And therefore, tissue shrink takes longer to recover. This sort of shrink also, the respiratory loss, can take longer to recover. Handling, cattle shrink less when they are handled as quietly as possible upon removal from pasture, even pens. And it's believed that handling procedures that create more stress on cattle will have a negative impact on cattle body weight, shrink, and recovery time. And in fact, we've also seen this with handling being very stressful. We can increase the bruising for those cattle that say going to a packing plant. Definitive research evaluating pre-shipment diets and management has produced some variable results. There is some data suggesting feed ionophores for extended periods before shipment may help reduce shrink. Allowing cattle to graze for prior to shipping not only allows them to gain additional weight, but also reduces their rate of shrink during the early shrink period. Hutchinson et al. Early work showed that supplemental potassium for calves, say, upon arrival at a feed yard in the receiving diet, can offset some of that shrink loss and bring back recovery much more quickly. So feeding of electrolytes has been known for a while in receiving cattle diets, say 1.2% potassium can be suggested, especially for calves that have been shipped some distance.